West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
Spring comes to us every year, and as Scott alluded to earlier, that part of the theme of today's perspective by Greta will be based on renewal, which is a common theme for spring. Imagine if each of us could also become a new self each year. At springtime, or maybe on your birthday. Imagine if we could do that for good, whenever we chose to do so. I was moved by the readings for today and the theme, and what came to my mind was a song by George Harrison, "Isn't It a Pity?" So I'm just going to go through a couple of verses here, just to, I think it sets the tone and says something. I hope it says something to you. Forgive me, George Harrison. Isn't it a pity? Now isn't it a shame how we break each other's hearts and cause each other pain? How we take each other's love without thinking anymore, forgetting to give back. Isn't it a pity? Some things take so long, but how do I explain when not too many people can see we're all the same? And because of all their tears, their eyes can't hope to see the beauty that surrounds them. Isn't it a pity? So I took Greta on her word that it doesn't matter how bad we sing. In here, it's a very forgiving group, so there you go. Not that was... And now we've got the readings for today. First one comes from George Alexander Kubler, an 84-year-old who died in 1996. He was an American art historian and among the foremost scholars on the art of Pre-Columbian America and Ibero-American art. He was born in Hollywood, but spent most of his education in Europe. He did study at Yale in the late 30s and was a member of the Yale University faculty, and where he received several awards, including 3 Guggenheim Fellowships. Actuality is when the lighthouse is dark between flashes. It's the instant between the ticks of the clock or your watch. It is a void interval slipping forever through time. The rupture between past and future. The gap at the poles of the revolving magnetic field. Infinitesimally small, but ultimately real. It is the interchronic pause when nothing is happening. It is the void between events. George Kubler. Next reading comes from Shellen Lubin, 70-year-old, and she's an American director, writer, performer, teacher of theater and music, and she's best known for her philosophical musings about art and artists found on her Monday morning quotes and articles in her publication, Backstage. Clean slate? No, never. That's not life. Life is beginner mind with a full slate, a dirty slate. Whatever slate you've got. You are, we all are, complicated interactions with related and unrelated history and triggers, unfinished tasks, and incomplete projects. Shellen Lubin. I think she might have talked to my wife. The next reading comes from Thomas Merton. He's a 53-year-old, died in 1968, short life. He's an American Trappist monk, writer, theologian, mystic, poet, social activist, and scholar of comparative religion. He wrote more than 50 books in his short life, mostly on spirituality, social justice, and quiet pacifism. There is an instinct for newness, for renewal, for liberation of creative power. We seek to awaken in ourselves a force which really changes our lives from within. And yet the same instinct tells us that this change is a recovery of that which is deepest, most original, most personal in ourselves. To be born again is not to become something else, but to truly become ourselves. Thomas Merton, from Choosing to Love the World on Contemplation. These readings, of course, are offered to us as wisdom on our journeys.
We walk in His light.
Thank you.
I still have to work on getting that mic, so I'm not tied to these things, so that's going to be on my list for this week. But let me take an opportunity to thank our tech team for what it is they do, and a welcome to Ian, who has joined us, I think, for the first time this week, so thank you for being here with us. So as I was working on the theme renewal for this week, I realized there were a number of different ways that we could look at renewal. We could look at it in terms of the seasons. We could look at it in terms of renewal in our lives, like how we're making some change and moving forward, or think about it more intimately as the renewal of our own personal life, our own choices, our own way that we have been in the world, and move into that new space. And I was caught when I was looking for quotes and readings. I was captivated by Craig Lounsborough's quote, and it really sent me off on the journey. And that's his quote about being the slumlord of his own heart. And that was such a profound comment to me, because when you think about a slumlord, what do you think? You think about someone who doesn't care. You think about communities that are dirty and a mess, that are not repaired, that have broken windows, probably dangerous, because as communities degenerate and buildings and houses are less cared for, people care less for the people inside those buildings as well. Just going to grab my water. People care less for the people on the other side of the fence or the other side of the street. There's this whole degenerative element that takes place when the people who own spaces don't care for them. And I think Lounsborough was talking mostly about people who own property that other people live in, because he used the word landlord, and we don't tend, if we're homeowners, we don't tend to think of ourselves as landlords. So it's about someone who is responsible for your space and not caring for it. But he was talking about that real estate, which is ours, which is most profoundly ours, and that's our hearts. We can't get to a more intimate real estate than that one that beats inside us, that holds us to the everyday, that holds us within our relationships, that helps us moderate our way through the world, palpitating with extreme effort in times of stress, and with joy and uplifting moments. That real estate which is in our heart. And Lounsborough looks at it and says, well, not taking very good care of that, right? I'm acting as though it belongs to someone else, and I just don't care. How do we take that time to sink down into that work of caring for our own hearts? So as I work through this concept, I'm going to actually reverse the readings from the way that they came about. And the first reading was the one about an understanding of the novel and the new, and finding things that are new in our lives, and trying to live out a world in which everything is new would be something that's impossible. because we spend our lives tracking the paths that we've made before. We do the same things we've always done. We brush our teeth, start on the same side. Who starts on the right side? You're brushing your teeth. Who starts on the right side?
As opposed to the wrong side?
No. The right side and the left side. Who starts on the left side? Okay, if the people on the left side, are you using your right hand? Okay. People on the right side, are you using your left hand? There we go. Well, okay, we got a few off there, but we tend to find ourselves doing the same things all the time, right? And we can come about renewal by suddenly deciding that we're going to shift things and change them and do something differently. But I think that, just a second, I think that one of the things that has been the most profound in our journey towards understanding ourselves and looking into our hearts is one that we've identified as the spiritual journey. And Thomas Merton was a monk. I don't know if somebody died in 1968. Can you still speak of them as contemporary? I would consider him a contemporary theologian. And probably the one, I mean, he wrote dozens of books. And he had this intimate relationship with spiritual leaders across traditions in a way that many people within religious traditions don't ever do. So he had a relationship with the Dalai Lama. He had a relationship with the Tibetan monk Thich Nhat Hanh. He sought out those engagements with others who might be able to help him see a new way, right? He was exploring the ways of being deeply in touch with the intimate realities of life, the intimate stories of the heart. And he did that. And I used his reading because I think that when we are within a spiritual tradition, we tend not to look for something outside of that tradition unless we become spiritual seekers. And we all know people who are spiritual seekers, who are looking for some other way of engaging the world. And then, if you look for books, if you read books by someone who has been on a spiritual quest, and I got one in the mail just yesterday or the day before, they're generally about finding something that's new. Right? And that's the piece of newness that I wanted to talk about. That if it's something new and it's not what we've always done, then it's probably got more value for us, or that's what we tell ourselves. And so if we step into some, as the United Church did in the 1970s, moving from a very cerebral, very academic perspective in its leadership. It began conversations with the Anglican Church of Canada, and then we had clergy who weren't wearing Geneva gowns, which was a sign of having achieved a certain academic success. We had clergy starting to go into albs, which is a long outfit. I wore a long purple one, which used to upset the Anglicans because purple is the bishop's color. But a long alb, which was more about being, a spiritual person than an academic person. And we began to do things like, how many of you grew up in churches? If you were in the United Church, how many of you grew up in a United Church that used Advent candles? Like back in the 1950s and 60s? 70s and 80s. Because the 1970s was when the United Church was starting to talk to the Anglicans. And so we started doing things like Advent wreaths, and we started using liturgical colors, introducing the colors of the seasons, the liturgical seasons. So it was all this new element that was deepening our spiritual understanding. So that's one of the ways in which we start looking for something that's deeper and richer for us, is to go to that which is new, particularly when we're trying to understand ourselves in the place in the world. When we look at Shellen Lubin's, though, a lot of that conversation is we need a clean slate. Okay, I'm going to start with a clean slate. And that's, we often think of that. Okay, that's how I'm going to work on this. I'm coming back from work after two and a bit years. It's going to be a clean slate. Like, that's going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. And Shellen Lubin's poem is exactly that there's no such thing as a clean slate. You can start over again, absolutely, but keep all that stuff there. You know that scum in the bathtub? Don't clean it off your heart. Just leave it there. It's ugly. It's not pretty. It might even smell, but it's your heart. And you can't just wipe that away. You can't wipe away the hurt. You can't wipe away the anger. You can't wipe away the torn relationships that you've had. You can't wipe away all of the beauty that overwhelms you from points in time. You wouldn't want to do that, but all the rest of it, bathtub scum, you have to keep that too, because that's all learning. Maybe not in the actual bathtub, but you get what I'm saying. It's all learning. And Shellen, as a producer and a director of art forms, knows that the deepest, richest art comes out of that place where mysterious microscopic pieces are growing and emerging and becoming something that was never seen before. And that's what's in your heart, is the stuff that can come out in a variety of different ways that you couldn't imagine. But if you spent the time in the moment and the energy sitting with that, running through it, exploring it, letting it replicate, what could come out? If you wrote a letter to a friend who died 30 years ago, knowing that they could never share it with anyone, what would that letter say? What would your heart tell you that you could now tell them? And then send that letter to yourself, and what might you learn? Lubin is right. We can't just let that slate go clean. But I think the most profound reading that I came across was the first one from Kubler. And it speaks to, I think, the spiritual journey that each of us can take when we start to see the world not as a succession of a lifetime, or as journal entries, telling us we need to go from here to there, and then journal entries that said we went from there to here, but as in a succession of moments that unfold within our heart. And the piece that he picked up was that moment between, which is undefined. That moment when the light doesn't shine from the lighthouse is the first image that he gives us. That there's no light. So possibility is there. And then the light's there again, and that's fine. But in the darkness of that possibility, what might be? What fears might arise if we're all alone someplace and suddenly we've lost our way? Oh, there it is. We've lost our way. Oh, there it is. We've lost our way. Oh, this is different. If we sit in that moment of darkness between the light and we let that bathtub stuff grow, that's a really gross image, I know, but that's why I gave it to you, because you won't forget it, right? And you let it grow. Who are you? Who were you? Who might you be? But in that darkness, it's the who you are, not who the world has seen between the flashes, right? Not who the world has seen. He lifts also that time between the ticks on a watch. And he also picks up on the space between now and before, right? What happened between before and now, and what happens between now and next. And in this moment of time, with all the celebration that took place yesterday, when we dug deep, 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 deep into tradition that has been around for thousands of years, I believe King Charles was wearing King Charles II's crown, or something like that. So that tradition is so long and deep, and even the attempts to create some meaning for it in the contemporary society can only ever fall flat on contemporary society because it's so foreign to contemporary society. So it has its meaning and its depth, and we can relate and resonate with that, but in that tick of the watch that brought us to now, nothing happened. There was no renewal. There was no change that we could see in that pageantry. So how might that change come about beyond the pageantry? How might the world shift under this? I have no idea. I'm responsible for my life. I'm responsible for the renewal of my heart. I'm responsible for opening my eyes to what the world has to offer me. I'm responsible for what I see on my feed when I open up my computer. I'm responsible for reading it or ignoring it. I'm responsible for having the conversations with the people I choose to have conversations with. And sometimes they're people I've never met before, and sometimes they're the people I know I am totally safe with, and I can say what I need to say. And sometimes the people I think I'm totally safe with are the people who say some of the worst things to me, because then I have to pay attention and learn. It's like the scum on the tub saying, okay, you've had this inside you for so long, why can't you see it yet? And someone will remind me that I have been blind and that I have to know and understand and see something differently. There's always a space, and there's always a decision to be made in that space. Now, I know that everything I've said today is so bloody abstract that it's almost impossible to make it happen. Like, I know that you'll go away from here thinking, what the hell was she talking about, right? I have no idea what she was talking about. That space between, the light between the lighthouse, the scum on the tub. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? You don't have to do anything with my words. I never expect or demand that you do anything with my words. But I do hope that this place and this gathering invites you to do something with your heart. Not just today, but every day. And that you risk that the moment between beats is a moment of change and opportunity and hope and fear and excitement. That's what I hope. So it doesn't matter if I made sense. It matters if your heart beats and you notice the space between them. I loved that poem from Browning, which I haven't, here. There's not a road long enough to outrun the dawn. We can't avoid tomorrow. We can't avoid the next heartbeat. We can't avoid the next call on our resources. We can't avoid the next time we're going to have to stand up and be honest. You can't outrun the dawn. Let the sun rise, for I am ready. You are ready. Let the sun rise. Thank you.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.